When I was a young man in my early 20s, I didn't have a lot of money. So for fun, I played poker with friends. A $20 buy-in was good for 10 hours of entertainment with a chance to win over $100. At first, I lost pretty frequently, but each game was a learning experience, and little by little, I began to learn the game behind the game. Until recently, I had never considered poker in the context of literacy, but I found it's a very accurate way of describing the skills necessary to be a competent player. A poker game is a literacy event involving a number of literacy practices. There's quite a bit involved in being poker literate, and in this video, I will give an overview of the various literacy practices involved in playing skillfully. And since Texas Holdem is my favorite variant of poker, I'm going to be giving you examples using Texas Holdem. This is the deck of standard playing cards. Texas Holdem is played with a single deck of cards. The deck of playing cards consists of 54 cards divided into 4 suits of 13 cards each and 2 jokers. The 4 suits are spades, hearts, clubs, and diamonds. Each suit consists of 13 cards. In sequential order, the first 10 cards are the ace through the 10. The higher valued cards outrank the lower valued cards with the possible exception of the ace, which can, in poker, be both high and low. Next we have the jack, the queen, and the king. Also we have 2 jokers. In the version of Texas Holdem I'm going to be illustrating today, we're not going to use the jokers, but the jokers are sometimes used in home games as wild cards. That is to say that they stand in as the value of any other card you want them to be. A poker hand is a combination of 5 cards that are ranked in order of strength. In Holdem, you use 2 initially dealt cards and 5 community cards to make your poker hand. The following poker hands are presented in order of strength from weakest to strongest. The weakest poker hand is a pair. A pair is 2 cards of the same rank. For example, here I have 2 pairs. I've got a pair of aces in the top hand here, and in the bottom hand here I have a pair of deuces. Note we have 2 cards of equal rank and 3 cards that don't match at all. Also note that in Texas Holdem, the ace is considered a high card, which means it outranks the king, with one possible exception, which I'll be getting to momentarily. The next poker hand we have is called 2 pair. This is just as the name implies. We have 2 separate pairs. In our example, you see we have a pair of aces and a pair of eights. The highest 2 pair possible is aces and kings. After 2 pair, we have 3 of a kind. This is simply 3 cards of the same rank. In our example, you see we have 3 aces. 3 pair of aces is the highest 3 pair possible. The next hand we have is a straight. A straight is 5 cards in sequential order. The suit is irrelevant. We have here, for an example, the ace, king, queen, jack, and 10. Incidentally, ace, king, queen, jack, 10 is the highest straight possible. The next hand is called a flush. The flush is 5 cards of all the same suit. In our example, we have a spade flush. The highest possible flush hand is called an ace-high flush. Next up, we have a full house. A full house consists of 3 of a kind and a pair. In our example, we have aces full over kings. Aces full over kings is the highest possible full house. The next hand is called 4 of a kind. This is 4 cards of the same rank. In our example, we have 4 aces. 4 aces is the highest possible 4 of a kind. The next hand we have is a straight flush. A straight flush is 5 cards in sequential order of all the same suit. As with the straight, an ace can be counted as either high or low. The strongest hand in the game is called a royal flush. This is the highest straight flush possible. If you ever get a royal flush, bet everything you have because you cannot lose. A royal flush consists of ace, king, queen, jack, and 10, all of the same suit. This is a once-in-a-lifetime thing, so make the best of it. Now that we know what the poker hands are and what beats what, I'm going to explain the structure of a Holdem hand. There are three main phases to a Holdem hand. The first phase is called the setup, where the cards are shuffled, cut, and dealt, and blind bets are added to the pot. After two cards are dealt face down to each player, we enter the betting rounds phase of the hand. The first betting round is when two players first bet on their first two cards. After the betting round is done, a single card is taken off the top of the deck and placed next to the deck. This is called a burn card. Then three cards are dealt face up in the center of the table. This is called the flop. Another round of betting commences. After the flop, another burn card. Then one card is dealt face up next to the flop cards. This betting round is called the turn, or 4th street. After another round of betting, another burn card, then the last card, called the river, is dealt face up next to the turn card. A final round of betting commences, and we transition to the showdown phase, where whatever players are still left in the hand show their cards and a winner is determined. To be clear, the showdown can happen during any of the betting rounds if one or more players run out of money to bet with. This happens frequently in no-limit games, where players bet all their money in a single bet. After the showdown is concluded, the player to the dealer's left becomes the dealer for the next hand. With me so far? If not, don't worry. It'll start to make sense as I flesh out the mechanics of betting. In Hold'em, as in all forms of poker, you are betting that you have or will have the strongest hand by the showdown phase. Though bets can be made using physical currency, it is far more common to use token called chips or checks to stand in place of money. These chips are redeemed after the game is over for actual money. Different colored chips are typically used to denote different monetary denominations. When a player makes a bet, he puts his chips in the middle of the table. The chips in the middle of the table representing the current wager are called the pot. So we have cards and chips. Now we're ready to make a bet, right? Well, not quite. We can't make a wager until we know what the stakes are. The stakes refer not only to how much money is on the table, but the increments in which we are allowed to bet. There are three main types of stake limits. They are fixed limit, pot limit, and no limit stakes. Fixed limit is when there is a limit to how much you can bet at one time. Pot limit means that the maximum amount you can bet is equivalent to the amount in the pot. No limit means that there are no limitations on the amount a player can bet at one time. Now we're ready to start betting. Here's how we do it. The betting starts with the player left at the dealer and works clockwise around the table. The two players left at the dealer are required to make a compulsory bet known as a blind bet. The player to the immediate left of the dealer makes half the full bet for that round, and the player to the left of him makes a full bet. A blind bet is only made during the initial betting round. A player can fold, call, or raise. Folding is where a player decides to forfeit his cards and any money already wagered, and no longer takes part in the rest of the hand. Calling is where a player matches the wager to stay in the hand. Raising is making a bet. After the initial bet, players can re-raise up to 3 times on a single wager. When a bet is made or increased, the remaining players must call the bet to stay in the hand or they must fold. Unless you're familiar with poker, you're probably wondering what this all looks like put together, which means a demonstration is in order. We start by shuffling the cards. The cards are then presented to the player on the dealer's right in order to cut the cards. Then we deal 2 cards face down to every player.
Molly throws in a small blind. Luke follows up with the big blind. Scotty calls. As do I. Molly calls as well. And we have the flop. Molly makes a bet.
I fold.
Luke folds. Scotty folds. I call. And re-raise. Molly calls. Burn and turn. Molly bets. I call. Raise. Molly checks it. Last card up, the river. Molly bets. I call. Now it's time for the showdown.
Now that we have a basic grasp of gameplay, it's time to explore some of the more advanced literacy practices involved with Holdem. Most of these revolve around determining when and how to bet. One of the first things to consider at the start of a new hand is your position at the table. Where are you in relation to the dealer? If you are the dealer, then you are in prime position, because you're not obligated to make a blind bet and you bet last. This means that you get to see how everyone else is betting before you have to make a decision as to whether or not you want to stay in the hand. Also, you can fold at no cost to yourself. If you are paying a blind bet, then it may make more sense to call a small bet during the initial betting round in order to see the flop. The closer you are to the dealer's right, the better your position, so take advantage of it. An essential skill in poker is calculating odds. Now, I'm going to attempt to explain this, and this may sound difficult, but trust me, it's easier done than said. To calculate the odds of pulling a specific card is actually quite easy. First, what you need to do is count the cards that you can see on the table. This includes your whole cards and whatever community cards are on the table. Once you have that number, say after the flop, that number will be 5. 2 whole cards, 3 community cards. Then you subtract them from 52, the number of cards in a full deck. That gives you 47. So, if you have 3 aces and you're looking to see what the odds are you're going to pull that 4th ace, your odds are 1 in 47, or 46 to 1 against. Those are called probability odds. They come in pretty handy. One other thing to keep in mind is that more than one card can usually give you what they call an out. That is to say, maybe more than one card can help you get the winning hand. So your odds might be like 2 in 47 or 3 in 47. Also, there's a concept called pot odds. Pot odds is simply put, you count how many people are at the table and you count yourself as one in that many. For example, if I have 4 people playing in a hand, my odds of holding the best possible hand are 25%, or 1 in 4. That means the odds against me having the best hand are 3 to 1. Don't worry if this sounds a little complicated. It's really not. And to be quite honest, it's not that big of poker anyway. Finally, we come to spotting tells. There are very few universal tells that'll indicate what your player's holding. Though I will say from experience, if you ever have a player making a bet and his hands are trembling ever so slightly, this isn't because he's afraid. This is because he's got a monster hand and he's about to get paid. Definitely fold. For the most part though, spotting tells involves getting familiar with your opponent's behavior so that you can spot any idiosyncrasies in their behavior. There's no shortcut for this. It just comes with time and experience. In a lot of ways, poker is about playing the man, not the cards. The first step in manipulating your opponent is to assess their attitude towards risk. There are three attitudes regarding risk: risk averse, risk seeking, and risk neutral. Risk averse means that you are afraid to take risks, and risk seeking means that you like it a little bit too much. The adoption of risk neutrality is the goal of every solid player. This means that you are neither looking to gamble for the thrill of it, nor are you afraid to take calculated risks if the odds are in your favor. Knowing the category your opponent falls in is critical if you want to bluff them into folding or to set a trap for them. An extension of attitudes toward risk are the player types. There are four main types of play styles. The calling station is a loose passive player who doesn't do much except call when bet against. These players are great to have at the tables as they keep adding money to the pot. The maniac is a loose aggressive player who is willing to go all in on a pair of twos. These players can be intimidating, but the key is to play a little tighter against them and clean them out when you have a hand. The rock plays a tight passive game, not being fond of taking risks. They play only premium hands and don't bluff much. If a rock makes a bet at you, you know they're holding decent cards. The last play style is the solid player, a tight, aggressive play style that is well-rounded and risk-neutral. They usually play premium hands but are not afraid to bluff. Adaptable and calculated, these opponents are ones to watch out for. People put a lot of emphasis on bluffing in poker, but in my experience it should be done sparingly. The idea is to deceive your opponent by acting in a manner contrary to the cards you are holding. This can vary depending on the sophistication of your opponent. If your opponent is an experienced player, it may be wiser to play your hand straight up when you have a good hand, so they think you're bluffing, and then try to call you on it to their detriment. Alternatively, if an opponent spots your tell, you can consciously reproduce the tell to your advantage, or fabricate the tell in order to lead them into thinking that it hasn't figured out. If you do try this, remember to be consistent. One of the most important aspects to bluffing is having a good poker face. This means keeping your expression neutral so your opponent can't gain any information from your expression or body language. While we've been primarily talking about Texas Holdem, I want to relate to you a word of caution when playing other variants of poker that you're not accustomed to. When I was 21, I went to a riverboat casino to do a little gambling. My usual Holdem table was being used for a tournament, so I decided to sit down to the 7-card stud table. There was a solid player at the table, a couple of rocks, a couple of calling stations, and a maniac. As we were playing, I spent a good hour trying to get a hand. Finally got a hand, but the solid player was spotting my every move. What does this tell us? This tells us that poker is like a language, and every variant is its own dialect. And while you may understand the grammar and semantics of this language, the dialect can really throw you off. But studying other forms of poker can help you in your main. Thank you for watching this video. In the last few minutes, we've learned a bit about poker and the various mechanics involved. Additionally, we've gone over the basic literacy, such as the various poker hands and rules of gameplay. Then we discussed advanced literacy, such as calculating odds, reading your opponent, and bluffing. Finally, I have shown how each variant of poker is like its own dialect with its own specific nuances. I hope you found this both educational and enjoyable. See you at the card table.